Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. And the last time we touched base, you were conducting the World Village Gospel Choir, and you actually wear many musical hats. And so maybe for people who aren't familiar with your work, you could tell us about some of your musical activities.
Sure. When I moved back to Winnipeg in 2012 from Vancouver, I started up World Village Gospel Choir with my wife, Rachel Landrecht. So we do gospel and world music, and we perform 3 or 4 times a year. And I love doing that. It's really fun. And I also teach music at CMU. So I teach theory and composition and a composition seminar as well. That's where the opera is going to be premiered. And I write operas. Not in my spare time. Writing operas is my main thing. Since I made a decision to call myself an opera composer, that's been the main focus.
Well, I certainly remember City Workers in Love from many, many moons ago.
That's right. It premiered in 1992 at the Fringe Festival, and then it played at the First Night Festival, and it went on to be performed all over the place. It's still being performed, actually.
Well, I'm not surprised. It was great. It makes me laugh just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's such a funny show. Michael Cavanaugh, who wrote the libretto, is a wonderful comedic genius, and we had so much fun working on that show. Actually, Donna Fletcher, who's directing the show, was in the original City Workers in Love.
Right. Yeah. So are you attracted to the sort of the comedic angle of opera writing?
I am, because I think it's in the world of opera, there's a lot of tragedy. It's much harder to get your audience to laugh out loud than it is to get them to cry. So, plus, I think the world could use a little more humor. And I have an excellent partner in my comedic operas, Michael Cavanaugh, the director, who just directed Falstaff. He's brilliant, and he writes really funny stuff. So we are collaborating on the next new opera, which don't have a title yet, but we're just, we've always got something that we're working on. So yes, comic operas are one of my favorite things.
All right. Well, your opera, Merry Christmas, Stephen Leacock, is coming up with a little opera company. How did that association come about?
Well, I've known Spencer Duncanson for a long time, and we sat down when I first moved back to Winnipeg from Vancouver in 2012, and just, how's it going? Hadn't seen him for a while, just sort of reconnected, and I had a couple of shows that I wanted to show him. And so this was one of the shows that I showed him, which I had written in 97 originally, but it had never been performed. But it had been workshopped twice, once by Vancouver Opera and once by the Little Chamber Music Series That Could company in Vancouver. But I'd never seen a production. So I gave him the score and the CD, and I said, "What do you think?" Gave me some honest feedback. So he listened, and he gave me some great feedback. He said, "Would you be up for doing some revisions?" And I said, "Yes, of course." So I did the revisions and had a workshop this past summer with the 3 singers who are in the show. And Spencer came for the workshop presentation. We sang through the whole thing, and he loved it. And so he said, "Well, let's produce it." So in the opera world, that's in a way, from the summer to December, that's a very short turnaround. But in another way, it's been almost 20 years. So it's kind of short and long at the same time.
So it's a world premiere after a gestation period of 20 years. All right. Well, Merry Christmas, Stephen Leacock. Tell us what it's about.
Well, Stephen Leacock was renowned mostly for his comedic stories.
Yes.
He was the most read English language writer in the world in around 100 years ago. But this story is very unlike him. He kind of puts himself in the story a la Charles Dickens and Christmas Carol. So he's in the story trying to type out a happy Christmas piece of Christmas fluff for some magazine, because he was a commercial writer as well. But he can't do it because all he sees in the newspapers are headlines of World War I.
Right.
So he kind of he types and he rips the paper out. He types, he rips the paper out. Then finally he types "Christmas killed by greed and war," and he kind of puts his head in his hands. And at that point, the spirit of time appears, and she's an omniscient, all-knowing, eternal being, and basically engages in a dialogue with him and said, "What's the problem?" And so he tells everything that he's been seeing going on in the world, and he ends his kind of aria with, "I wouldn't believe in Christmas if Father Christmas himself showed up." And time says, well, as a matter of fact, he's waiting outside. So Father Christmas comes in, but instead of the jolly Father Christmas that we know, he's bedraggled, he's been shot at, he's stepped on landmines, he's been bombed, his clothes are all torn, and he's carrying the sack of books. He's been trying to deliver these presents of books to these kids, but some of them are in their hospital, some of them are dead. So he's distraught, and he's also suffering from PTSD. So he's hallucinating, he's imagining machine guns in Leacock's study, and so they have to kind of talk him down. They sit him in a comfy chair close to the fire. Time and Leacock do, and they give him a glass of schnapps, and he kind of revives himself a little bit. And so through this encounter, Time and Christmas convince Leacock that what he needs to do with his writing is write about peace. And so that's how the opera ends, on a very hopeful note. So it's a very different kind of story from Leacock.
Well, okay, first of all, why did you choose Stephen Leacock?
Well, I have a friend. His name is Dwayne Beaver, and he saw City Workers in Love in Vancouver. Dwayne is a filmmaker and a very interesting guy, and he saw City Workers. He had never imagined opera could be sung in English. So he came to me and he said, I have this idea for an opera. And so he showed me the short story, and he had done an adaptation. And so he brought it to me. And then I worked with a Vancouver area writer named Pamela Post, and we worked a little bit on the libretto together, and it became part of my thesis when I was doing my master's degree at UBC. So it actually came to me, and then it's had this long, like you say, long gestation period.
All right. Well, having said that, you're so great at writing comic operas, it sounds like it's a serious story.
Well, it is, but we're trying to find the light in the story too. Like 2 years ago, Vancouver Opera produced my opera Stick Boy, which was about bullying.
Yes.
Which had a lot of darkness in it, but also there was a lot of light. There was a lot of funny stuff that Shane wrote, and you need that. You can't just be all downer all the time when you're in a theater show, right? You just, at least not in the show that I'm doing. So there are some funny moments when they're talking about schnapps, and Father Christmas talks about all these books that he's bringing to his children. He goes off on a kind of a wild aria about how much he loves of these authors. So there is light. There's definitely light in it. It's like an elegiac kind of tale. It's somber, but it has a hopeful ending. And of course, the music adds layers of meaning to it that help with that hopeful theme.
All right. Well, thank you so much for telling us about it, and we'll look forward to the world premiere, December 1, 2, and 3.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Neil.